Marcel, thank you so much for joining us and your willingness to be our first person today. You have so much to share with us, and we really have a short period, so we'll go ahead and get started right away, I think. World War II began in September 1939 when Germany attacked Poland from the west, quickly followed by the Soviet Union attacking Poland from the east. Early in the war, you and your family lived under Russian occupation. Before we talk about that time, before we talk about the war, tell us a little bit about your family and your community and you before the war began.
Well, my father was an accountant and worked at the lumber factory. My mother was a housekeeper and took care of me and my sister. The Drohobycz was a small town of about 60,000 people. 20,000 were approximately Polish and 20,000 Ukrainians and 20,000 Jews. People lived in peace, and they had their churches, synagogues, and Ukrainian churches, and there was sports clubs, and in general everything was okay. One of my uncles was a soccer player, and he was a very, very good soccer player. So that's about all about Drohobycz was well, it's okay. It was a good town to live.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Marcel, on September 17th, 1939, Russia attacked Poland. And as we mentioned, as a result, you were living under Russian occupation until June of 1941. Tell us what that time was like when you were under the Russians in that period till 1941.
Yes. The Russians very quickly wanted to make Drohobycz a part of the Russian country. They nationalized factories, big buildings, stores, and they it was, but they did not pick on the Jews. Everybody was equally taken care of. The Russians also deported people that they considered enemies of the state, the intelligentsia and rich people and so forth. So among those that were deported to Russia were my wife's parents. They were deported to Siberia, and Anya, my wife Anya, was born in Siberia. Later on, it turned out that being deported to Russia would be a good thing, because about 80 or 90% of these people survived, and and the rest, the 90% that didn't, weren't sent to Russia, were killed. About 10% survived.
Marcel, you had some family members, some uncles who joined the Russian army, is that right?
Well, they did not join. They were taken.
They were taken. Yes.
During that time that we were under Russian occupation, on the western part of Poland, the Germans already started doing their devil's think. They started ghettos, and we somehow knew about it. As a matter of fact, there was a gentleman that managed to run away from Poland, Western Poland, and he stayed with us, and he told us what was going on. So we were aware that it was a bad thing going on in the West. So when the Germans attacked Russia, my father was the oldest of 5 siblings. My mother was the oldest of 4 siblings. And there were young men that the Russians took to the Russian army. Some of the wives managed to go to Russia with their husbands that were taken to the Russian army. And so these uncles survived. Well, 2 of them were killed in fighting the German, and 3 of them survived.
Marcel, soon after Germany turned on the Soviet Union in June of 1941, German troops occupied your town, occupied Drohobycz, and of course life for Jews then changed dramatically and tragically. What happened when the Nazis came into Drohobycz? What happened to you and your family?
The first thing that, this is a little too bright. Can I?
Maybe they can turn it down a little bit. But we'll look out into the center part here if we can.
I'll look at the middle.
So when the Nazis, when the Germans came in,
the Nazis came to Drohobycz, they contacted Ukrainian nationalists that they could do whatever they want to with the Jews, that they could beat and kill and rob. So when the Germans came in the beginning of July 1941, the Ukrainian attacked the Jews. In Drohobycz, they came to my grandparents' house. They beat up my maternal grandfather so bad that he died within a few days. They robbed what they could take away with them. Among others, they were the albums of photos. They took the photos and the albums, and they shook out the photos into mud and took the albums. Well, after the war, my father went to see what was left from the house of the grandparents. It was gone. But a neighbor of my grandparents, Mr. Kotsko, came out of his house and handed my father a stack of photos, like about 100 photos. That all these photos are here in the Holocaust Museum, and some of these photos that you have seen here are from that.
And they were rescued from being.
They were rescued for mud. Now, my father was at that time the Russians sent my father for education. I don't know what kind of education, to Lviv, which is a big town near Drohobycz, and my father was there with my aunt. So their action in Drohobycz, about 200 people were killed. But in Lvov, 5,000 people were killed in the first 2 days of the German occupation, and one of those were my aunt Rivka. So in the first few days, I lost a grandfather and an aunt. Now, after that beginning, they had rules. The Germans had rules that applied to the Jews. The Jews were not supposed to walk on the sidewalks. They were supposed to walk on the middle of the street. They would have to wear armband with Star of David. They were not. They were radios, telephones, and arms. If anybody had any, it was all taken away from the Jews. Polish Jewish children were not allowed to go to school because they were all to be killed. The Polish and Ukrainian children could get about a four grade education because they were supposed to be the slaves, but be able to read and write. They started with rationing food and something called Raubaktionen and Killaktionen. They would kill people whenever they felt, and if they wanted to come to the Jewish house, they would come and take whatever they wanted.
And they were called actions, or actions that they would take.
Action in German, actions. Yeah. And it was, the start was very, very bad.
Yes. Marcel, tell us about your nanny and when you went to visit with your nanny. You'd had a nanny before the war.
Yes.
And tell us about her and that and what happened.
Yes. Her name was Jancia. I don't remember her last name, and she loved me very, very much. So she would come to our house and bring some food and played with me, and she was a wonderful person. But in our house there was four of us, my parents and my sister, and also the grandmother whose husband was killed, and the grandfather who was a widower. You saw him there on the photos, and my father's sister and two of her children. That sister's husband was taken to the Russian army. So it was 9 people. It was very, very crowded. So Jancia took me to her house and to ease it. Now what happened is when I was at Jancia's house, my sister started bothering my mother that she wants to play with me, and she's missing me and so forth. So my mother decided to go to Jancia. She took off the armband with the Star of David, and the Germans, if they would see anything that the Jews were doing or even not doing, they could be killed for no reason.
So taking off your armband,
for taking out of armband, you could be killed. My mother and my sister were both blonde, and they didn't look very Jewish. So my mother went to Jancia. When she came to Jancia's house, I was sitting in the corner, and Jancia was on the bed. She was giving birth to a baby, and there was no doctor, no nurse, no nothing, and I was there. I was 8 years old, and I was just sitting there.
You were the only one there. Yeah.
I was the only one. So when my mother came, she boiled water and did whatever she could do, and the baby came out dead. The baby did not survive. But in meantime, it became already night. So Jancia it suggested that we stay in her house, not go to the house in Drohobycz. So we stayed there, and the next day in the morning, Jancia's husband came from work. He worked in a nice night shift. So he came there and was very surprised that he saw us there. One of the rules that the Germans had is that if a Christian person gives a glass of water to the Jews, they could be killed. They could not help the Jews. So he said, if the Germans would come here and see you here, then we all would be killed. The problem with me was that only Jewish men were circumcised, and if the Germans suspected somebody to be Jewish, then they would just say, drop your pants, and if you are circumcised, you are a Jew, and you'll be killed. And if anybody would give us hiding, that they would also be killed. So he said, so you have to leave the house. It's very dangerous. So he gave us some bread and said to leave the house. We left the house, crossed the road, and came to a wheat field. It was August of 42, and we started going towards the woods, and we came about 2/3 of the field, and my mother found a indentation in the ground, and so she decided that we'll try to hide there. So she had a raincoat, the color of the wheat, and covered us that, and we were waiting. I need to. As we hid there, we heard Germans screaming, "Raus, raus, schnell!" That means get out and hurry up. And we heard shots, and we heard people screaming and begging for mercy, and it was 10 and 15 minutes, and then it stopped for a few minutes, and then started again, and it was like after that we call this a symphony of death. So it lasted maybe 3-4 hours, and then it stopped.
And this was an action that was going on.
This was an action. This is what, when Jancia's husband came, he says there is a big action going on in Drohobycz, so you have to get out. So this was a part of that action. When it quieted down, we waited another 15 minutes and half an hour, and then we got up and left and started going towards Jancia's house. As we came to the road, there was on the right side there was a German soldier with a German dog. He just looked at us So we stopped, and he looked at us, and we looked at him, and we thought that this is the end of our life. But he just turned around and walked away. The Germans, when they went hunting the Jews, they would never go by one person. They always was two of them, because they were afraid that somebody could have a human feeling and let the person go. And he was by himself. So this is perhaps that he had that moment. He just turned around and walked away.
Seeing a woman with her two little kids.
Two little kids, and maybe he thought that they were blonde and blue-eyed. It also helped. So we came to Jancha's house again and slept another night. And next day, our father came to pick us up. He was at that time in the dormitory of laborers in the lumber factory that he worked before the war. He worked there as a laborer, also as a laborer, and so he slept there and came to take us home. We went to our house, and when we came to our house, the door was broken in, and it was empty. Furniture turned over. And nobody was there. Everybody was gone. My one grandfather, one grandmother, one aunt, and 3 children, they were all taken to an Umschatzplatz, several days without food, without sanitary requirement, and they were taken to a Belzec concentration camp. Actually, it was not a concentration camp. It was the extermination camp. There were two kinds of camps at that time. The concentration camp, like Auschwitz, they would bring people and they would kill them slowly by working them to death, and they would get always new people and kill the ones that were already too tired to work. But extermination camp killed the people immediately.
And that was Belzec.
And this was Belzec, near the closest to Drohobycz. So my part of my family was killed there.
Marcel, that was August of 42. In the early fall of 1942, the Germans created the ghetto in Drohobycz, and the rest, you and your mother and children, brother and sister, were forced into the Drohobycz ghetto.
We were.
Tell us what it was like once you were in the ghetto.
Yes, in the ghetto, we were given one room in an apartment of 3 or 4 rooms. Each family would get one room. We had one mattress that all 4 of us slept. The Germans took the furniture away, so it was only one mattress. The Aktionen were very frequent. The food situation was critical. The rations were very, very small. So my father would go. We lived in the ghetto, and my father worked at the lumber factory. So he went with a group of people under police, with the Polish police guiding them, and he decided that things are not important, that life is important. So my father bartered with farmers For example, he would take a ring of his hand and for two loaves of bread. So this is how we provided enough bread so that we could survive. And Aktionen were quite frequent. There were children running around the ghetto that their parents were killed. It was just a terrible situation.
If I remember right, your family, your father created a hole under the mattress,
right,
where when an action was taking place, you would go and hide in this hole under the mattress.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there was one action that we all got there under the mattress, and there was another woman that lived nearby, and she said, if you we heard about that action, she said, if you don't take me with you there, then I'll give you to the Germans. So there was several. My family, this woman, and my uncle, who was sick. He was working, but that day he was sick, so he got with us on that to that hall. We heard people coming and going, and we heard my uncle was. He couldn't stand being
like claustrophobic.
Claustrophobic,
yeah.
right? So we heard the door close, and so my uncle lifted the mattress and put his face out, and then there was a Germans and Polish policemen, and that policeman said, "Birdie, get out and we'll take care of you. Get out." And my uncle got out, and luckily for him, this Polish officer was his schoolmate. They knew each other, so. My uncle negotiated with him how to make it so that you don't have to take us out. So my uncle lifted the mattress and says to my mother, "Give me your ring," and everybody else who had anything gave him that, and he. And the Polish policeman let us be, just didn't take our life, but took our things.
Marcel, you would spend almost a year in the ghetto, and I know we don't have time for you to tell us a lot more about that time, but you were every single day in constant fear of being taken, and the conditions were horrific. So your father, who was forced to work in the lumber yard, decided to get you out of there, and really did, I think, from what you shared with me, just an amazing thing. Tell us about that.
For an accountant, he was a very, very brave man, really. He was a hero. He was a wonderful man. So he, in the lumber factory, he prepared a place for us to hide. So he bribed the people from the ghetto were under the police. They were taken to the places where they worked. There were different places that people worked. So my father bribed the policeman that guided us, and father took me under his arm, and my mother took my sister under her arm. She dressed like a man, and we walked to the places where the men worked. When we came to the lumber factory, my father put us behind some bushes, and he took my mother and my sister, and he said, "I'll take them to the lumber, to the factory, and I'll come back for you." And after my father walked away, and my father said to me, "You are the man. You have to stay here and don't make any noise." So after father walked away, I was terribly scared. I was scared that he would leave me there and I'll be dead, because I heard stories that some parents would leave the children and looked for hiding. I don't know if it was true or not, but I was scared. So I ran after father and said, "Daddy, Daddy, Daddy," and another policeman saw it and told my father, "You can't do it." And father had something else to bribe him, and so we came to the factory.
And so he had constructed inside this factory a hiding place for you.
Yes.
In the midst of lumber, if I remember right.
Right.
I mean, just ingenious.
There was a building that wood was drying for furniture and father our father took us to that building, and on the attic we got on the attic there, and when we were hiding there, father would bring in the middle of the night, father would bring food. And we had a string, and we would put down the string and take down.
Because your father was supposedly, he slept in the dormitory.
He slept in the dormitory.
So he was officially in there, but you were hidden up there.
We were hidden, right. So he would come in the middle of the night and give us some food and took the wastes down. And it lasted like a week or 10 days, and a friend of my father, young woman, came to my father and said, "Jacob, there is this young woman, Teresa, and she thinks that you are hiding somebody. And she told me that if she'll find out if it's true that you are hiding, she'll do what she thinks is right, which is report you to the SS." And the Germans gave a kilo sugar or a kilo of
vodka, right? Or even vodka.
Vodka for hiding the Jews. So she's going to do that. So father was flabbergasted. He didn't know what to do. He had a friend there was a clinic on the lumber factory, and there was a doctor there. So my father talked to that doctor, who was educated in Vienna, because when my parents were born, Drohobycz was Austro-Hungary, and all the doctors were from Vienna. This doctor was from Vienna and had an idea. Father and the doctor discussed it very long, and he wrote an anonymous letter to SS, and stated there that he was a sexual encounter with this Tereska, and she gave him syphilis. So that's not a joke. So next day, a couple of SS men came to the factory and took her away. And at first they took her to the clinic to ask the doctor that if she really has syphilis, and he says, of course she has syphilis. So she disappeared until after the war.
So
it wasn't very ethical for a doctor to do.
But it saved your life.
But he saved the life of my family.
So from there, your father clearly knew he needed a better hiding place, and so that's what ended up getting you to the Savinskis. And so tell us about that.
Father would go to the villages nearby, near Drohobycz, and ask. There were people that knew our family, and Father would go there and ask if they wouldn't take us, and save us. And some people were very, very nice and said, well, we cannot do it, but the others were not so nice, and they would say, oh, you have a nice watch, you better give us your watch because we will report you. Because if the Germans would know that he is walking around without the armband, he would be killed. So they were not so nice. But finally he went to the farm of the Savinskis. We saw here they are Jan Savinski and Zofia Savinski. So they agreed to take my mother and my sister, because the situation that I explained before, they can always say that they were from another village family. So father was willing to let my mother and sister survive, and us not survive. So Mrs. Savinski came one night to the dormitory where my father was living at that time, and we started saying goodbye. Of course, I was still 8 years old, and I was crying, and my mother was crying, and Mrs. Savinski was crying, and then at one point she says, I can't take it anymore. I have children of my own, so we'll take Marcel with us. So we went. We didn't have anything to carry with us. We were just what we had on us. So we went the same night. We went through the woods and rivers, and we got to the Savinski farm.
So tell us about life in the Savinski farm.
Yeah.
Yep.
We would food situation was very bad because the rations were small, and if somebody would all of a sudden buy more food than there is people in that house, they would be suspicious that the people hide somebody. So the youngest son, Tadju, would go to one of the refineries where my uncle, you saw here, Gruber, he was a butcher, and Tadek would take a container and went to where my uncle worked. So he got the scraps from the tables for the pigs. And my uncle, every once in a while, would give him a loaf of bread or a piece of meat, which also, if the Germans would find out, they would kill him. So this was the food for pigs. We had the first choice. Whatever was still edible, we ate that. We would bathe once a month, and the children would bathe first, and the parents would bathe later. And my sister would look out on the yard, and there were chickens running around, and she would say, "Why can I not be a chicken? I would be safe." And she was also bleeding from her nose, and we were worried how will we bury her so that not to make that somebody know that there are people hiding there.
So you couldn't go for medical care. That was not
absolutely
an option.
no dental, no medical care. I forgot. Somehow my father convinced the Savinskis to take him, and this uncle that was a butcher. Mm-hmm. They loved him very much. Because they were neighbors. He was a tremendous guy, really, and so his wife and child were killed before, but he lived with another woman and with a child, 6-year-old child. So they accepted him too. So and then there were some people that family hid, and they also Savinskis take.
So and the Savinskis were very poor.
Very poor.
And dirt floors. It's not a big farm. Eventually, how many of you were living on their little bit of property?
There was 13 of us, and the Savinskis and four children.
And their 4 children.
It was a miracle that we survived.
And you said that there was a shed where you could sleep in. And then there was a little space over their cottage where people could sleep.
Oh yes. Some of us would sleep in the hole under the bed, or under
their cottage.
Right, and some would live on the on the attic. The attic was with there was not a chimney, but it was from
smoke from where
smoke
they cooked
would go through the attic and to get to the side. So those that were hiding on the attic were smoked. We really, our eyes and our and the others the others that were underground. We couldn't straight our legs. We couldn't talk loud. We had to talk whispering. We would all lay down and couldn't stretch our legs.
And this went on for such a long time. In these, and as you said, you bathed once a month. You said the the hygiene conditions were
Terrible.
horrible. People had lice and boils, and all these people are living there. What were the Savinskis like to do this? I mean, they did this at tremendous risk.
They were very religious, and they liked my mother very much because they knew her.
And 12 people that were closest.
They
to
were
her,
they were just decent people.
yeah. They took you in.
Decent people, yes.
I mean, I was struck when you shared with me, if I remember correctly, that even though they had some chickens and pigs, that the Germans forbade them from killing any animals without their permission, which was their way of keeping track of what was happening to food. So it wasn't like they could kill a few extra chickens.
They could not kill a pork or a chicken or anything because the Germans would know about it, and it would be very dangerous. Mm-hmm. So we would get out of hiding only in 1944 when the Russian front and the Western front was closed, and the planes would come and bomb the refineries. Everybody would hide, and we would come out and stretch the legs and walk around a little.
While the bombing's going on.
While the bombings were going on. That was the only time that we dared to get out.
Tell us about your liberation.
Well, the liberation, the Russian army liberated us on August 5th, 1944. We got out of the hiding, and I couldn't walk. My muscles were atrophied, and I could not talk loud because we were whispering all the time. We had absolutely nothing, just rags that we came 9 months before to the Savinskis. We went to the middle of the town. There were some organizations that helped the Jews, and there was about 400 Jews that survived.
Out of 20,000.
Out of 20,000. There were few more, like my uncles that survived in Russia, some partisans, and some that hid farther away. Anyway, it was about 700 that survived Drohobycz from the 20,000. The Russians started well, my father was made the director of that lumber factory, and he, provided lumber for Russian army, and he was sitting in the office barefoot. So a Russian general came, and he says, how can it be that your director is barefoot? And my father says, well, I don't have any shoes. So he got him military boots, and he also got some military boots for me. And I almost killed my feet.
And Marcel, as you said earlier, your legs are so atrophied you could barely walk. That really created difficulties when you started to go back to school.
Exactly.
Under the Russians. What happened then?
The teachers told my parents that your son is sort of strange. He doesn't play, he doesn't run, he doesn't talk, and and another thing that what the Russians did, they called my father to the KGB. This is the police, and they said, "You must have been a collaborator with the Germans because your family was survived." That never happened. So my father said, I wasn't a collaborator. There were some people that also survivors, and people that he worked with, came and certified that my father was not a collaborator. So can you imagine, after all that hell that we got through, they would accuse my father that he was a collaborator. It wasn't easy.
Marcel, we're about to run out of time, and there's just so much more you could have told us if we had had the time. But I do want you to just say a bit about the visitor you will have in a couple of weeks. If you would, I would appreciate that.
The great-great-granddaughter of the Savinskis lives in Drohobycz, and she is doing her PhD in history, and she found out that her great-great-grandparents hid some Jews, and some great-grandfather mentioned that there was a boy there, young boy, 10-year-old boy, Marcel Drimer, and so she Googled and she found my address, and so she sent a letter to University of Virginia and to the Holocaust. It introduced herself, and they sent it to me, and I said, absolutely, I want to contact that woman. I want to meet her, and we started communicating, and she invited us to come to Drohobycz and meet her. So 2 years ago, we went to Drohobycz. We went with a group of people from Israel, that they were from Drohobycz. And we met, her name is Maria. We went to the places, we spent there a week. We went to the places where people were killed. We went to the places where we were hiding, and the biggest impression that I had was to go to Mrs. Savinskis' grave and put some flowers on her. She was the one that was very important in our life, and so we were contacting her, and there was a group. There was somebody here in this museum. Some Ukrainian Jew donated some money, and for Ukrainian teachers. So she was invited to the Holocaust Museum, and in a month from now she'll come here and spend 2 weeks teaching, learning how to teach about Holocaust, and it's just an amazing story. She's a wonderful girl, young lady, and there was Drohobycz had a beautiful synagogue. That synagogue was in a terrible shape, and the 17th of June, that synagogue was opened, and it's beautiful. There were some photos of me and other Jews that came from there, and I'm just, and she was there, her photo was there, holding a list of righteous from that area, and the Savinskis were there. If you go and visit the museum, you can Google Savinsky, and you could see the they are called righteous among nations.
Marcel, we're gonna close our program in a moment, and what we didn't even begin to touch is the fact that Marcel and his family then stayed in Poland. They were there under the communists, and took a long time for him to be able to get out, but eventually did get out, and Anya followed him, and then they began their new lives here in the U.S. I'm going to turn back to Marcel to close our program in just a moment. I want to thank all of you for being with us. Remind you that we'll have programs twice a week until the middle of August. If you can't come back, all of our programs are available through the museum's YouTube page, so we hope you can watch some other programs as well. And this one will also be on the YouTube page as well. When Marcel finishes, because we didn't have a chance for you to ask him some questions, Marcel will remain on the stage here. We invite you, and we mean this, we invite you to come up here on the stage, say hi to him, get your picture taken with him, ask a question if you want to, and
Absolutely.
Marcel will be here as long as you're willing to do that. It's our tradition at First Person that our first person gets the last word. So with that, I'm going to turn back to Marcel to close today's program.
Yes. I just want to say that if you would like to read some of my stories, just Google Marcel Drimer, and then there is about 10 pages of links. But here I want to... This is last word. I am talking to you and others who want to listen to me because there are people and organizations who claim that the Holocaust is a hoax, that it never happened, that the Jews made it up to get money from the Germans. I am a witness that did happen. By listening to the stories of my childhood, you become witnesses also. Our good friend, late Charlene Schiff, said that we have to fight the four evils of I, four I evils: intolerance, injustice, ignorance, and indifference. Those are the roots of man's moral corruption that allowed Hitler and his master race helpers to come to power and torture and murder millions of people he considered Untermenschen, not worth living. Not only Jews, but people with disabilities, gypsies, homosexuals, and many other groups. Changing these behaviors is the path of providing Holocaust and genocides. And this is what this Holocaust is all about. And also another short, apropos this here. When Pastor Martin Niemöller was liberated from Dachau, he said this: first they came for the socialists, and I did not speak because I was not a socialist. Then they came for the trade unionists, and I did not speak out because I was not a trade unionist. Then they came for the Jews, and I did not speak out because I was not a Jew. Then they came for me, and there was no one left to speak for me. So this is all.
Thank you.